It started with a laugh, not a polite chuckle, not a measured smile, a sharp, unexpected burst of laughter that sliced through the courtroom's solemn air like a gavel striking marble. Judge Beryl leaned back ever so slightly, her hand grazing the bench as her shoulders shook. The courtroom froze. What could possibly make a federal judge laugh mid-hearing? Eyes darted across the room. A clerk's jaw hung open. Reporters exchanged quick glances, their pens momentarily suspended. One spectator stifled a gasp behind a trembling hand. The opposing counsel shifted in his seat, an uneasy smirk failing to mask the flicker of panic in his eyes. Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She didn't flinch. Her gaze held steady, calm, calculating, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. She adjusted her papers with deliberate precision, the faintest trace of confidence in her eyes. This wasn't just another day in court. It was live-streamed, clipped, replayed in real time on millions of screens. Social media timelines began to hum like a growing storm. Tweets, reactions. Did Judge Beryl just laugh? The villain across the aisle leaned forward, emboldened by the judge's reaction. He mistook it for validation, for the courtroom itself siding with him. His voice grew louder, almost theatrical now, basking in the brief spotlight. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Judge Beryl's laughter wasn't agreement. It was disbelief, the kind that cuts through grandstanding and exposes the flimsy scaffolding of a weak argument. Jasmine's fingers brushed a single page on the table. Her posture didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The spectators sensed it before anyone else. A murmur rolled through the gallery, low and electric. On the bench, the judge straightened. The laughter faded into a stillness so thick you could hear the echo of a cough from the back row. Reporters leaned closer, pens ready to capture whatever came next. This was the moment before the storm. The instant between arrogance and accountability. And as Jasmine slowly rose to speak, one truth became clear. No one in that courtroom, not the smirking opponent, not the gasping crowd, not even Judge Beryl herself, saw what Jasmine was about to unleash next. To understand why that laugh carried such weight, we need to rewind. Weeks before the hearing, the case had already ignited a political wildfire. What began as a procedural legal challenge had evolved into a symbolic showdown over truth, power, and identity. At its core was a dispute over voting rights violations, allegations of systemic bias, and a set of documents that, if proven authentic, could shift the balance in a high-stakes legislative battle. Cable news anchors branded it the case that could redraw the map. Pundits circled like hawks, each framing the fight through their partisan lens. For progressives, it was about protecting hard-won rights and demanding accountability from those who abused their platforms. For their opponents, it was a chance to discredit, distract, and diminish the rising voices challenging entrenched power. Enter the antagonist, a seasoned legal bulldog known for his bombast. He'd made his career by belittling opponents, often turning hearings into theatrical stages for his own political monologues. In the weeks leading up to this moment, he'd given interviews dripping with arrogance. "She's not ready for this," he scoffed on a conservative talk show. "Frankly, I don't think she understands the magnitude of the legal argument she stepped into." On another network, he went further. "I've been in this game longer than she's been in public life. This will be quick." His words were replayed endlessly online. Hashtags sprouted overnight, some mocking Jasmine, others defending her with fiery determination. Hashtag #SitDownJasmine trended alongside hashtag #WatchHerWork. Progressive activists rallied behind her, calling her the calm before the storm. Opponents painted her as naive, out of her depth. The digital battlefield was drawn, tweet by tweet, post by post. Meanwhile, editorial columns framed the hearing as more than just a legal proceeding. "This isn't about one case. It's about whose voices shape America's future," one headline declared. Commentators emphasized the historical weight. Women of color stepping into legal arenas once dominated by men who never expected to be challenged. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just an attorney. She was a symbol for immigrants, for progressives, for those who believed in dignity over bluster. As the date approached, the courthouse became a media circus. Satellite trucks lined the street. Activists held handmade signs with phrases like "facts over fear" and "history has its eyes on this court." Inside, security tightened. Reporters jostled for position, knowing any soundbite could go viral within minutes. The antagonist arrived first, flanked by cameras, his grin wide and confident. He waved like a candidate on a campaign trail, relishing the attention. "This will be fun," he muttered to a reporter, microphone catching every syllable. Jasmine entered quietly. No entourage, no grand gestures, just the steady, focused demeanor of someone who understood the magnitude of the moment. Her silence said what words couldn't. She wasn't here to perform. She was here to win. The night before the hearing, social media buzzed like a drum roll. Progressive pages urged followers to tune in live. Memes circulated with captions like "David versus Goliath, the courtroom edition." Polls showed the nation split. Some expected her to falter under the weight of a seasoned opponent. Others waited, almost holding their breath, for her to surprise everyone. By the time the gavel struck, this was no longer a quiet legal proceeding tucked away in some courthouse. It had become a mirror of America's cultural divide, a referendum on who gets to speak with authority and who gets laughed at for daring to stand their ground. It wasn't just another day in court. It was the stage for a national reckoning. Long before the courtroom filled with cameras and anticipation, the antagonist had built a reputation, one forged in bravado, sharpened by spectacle, and shielded by privilege. To his supporters, he was a fighter, a man who never backed down. To his critics, he was something else entirely, a bully dressed in legal robes, mistaking arrogance for skill. His rise began in the heated political climates of televised hearings and viral soundbites. While most attorneys leaned on evidence, he leaned on volume. While others dissected arguments, he perfected the smirk, a weapon he deployed right before a rhetorical jab. His signature move was to corner opponents with layered questions, delivered rapid fire, not to seek clarity, but to rattle. It wasn't about truth. It was about dominance. "I don't lose," he once declared in a primetime interview, leaning back in his chair as if the world were his courtroom. "People come at me with feelings. I respond with facts and force. That's why they fold." Clips of his past hearings revealed the same pattern. In one viral exchange, he mocked a young activist's testimony, interrupting her mid-sentence with a dismissive laugh. "You're emotional," he said, waving his hand as if swatting a fly. The crowd behind him chuckled. It wasn't about the issue. It was about the performance. In another case, he berated a colleague on live television, calling their legal strategy kindergarten law, while cameras zoomed in on his self-satisfied grin. The media loved it. He became a fixture on cable news panels, always ready with a biting one-liner and the air of someone convinced of his own infallibility. But beneath the surface of his polished self-image, a different record told the story. Quiet settlements followed several of his more theatrical victories. Cases he bragged about as slam dunks often ended with minimal gains or quiet walkbacks. A leaked memo from a former associate painted him as reckless behind closed doors, more focused on making headlines than winning solid cases. He treats court like a debate club, flashy, loud, but shallow, the memo read. Still, he thrived in environments where optics outweighed outcomes. Politically connected, media savvy, he built a brand on crushing opponents in public view, particularly those he perceived as idealistic or inexperienced. And Jasmine Crockett, in his eyes, was the perfect target. Younger, progressive, composed. To him, that translated to soft. His arrogance was reinforced by his inner circle. Loyal aides whispered in his ear, "You've got this." strategists framed every case as another opportunity to own the libs, as if the courtroom were just another prime-time studio. In private fundraisers, he boasted about his flawless track record, his ability to make opponents squirm. Guests laughed, cheered, wrote checks. He was the star, and he knew it. But cracks were beginning to show. Months before this case, a quiet scandal erupted over his mishandling of evidence in a separate trial. Documents he had confidently dismissed as irrelevant later turned out to be pivotal, leading to a narrow loss that embarrassed his firm. He brushed it off publicly, minor oversight, we'll get them next time. Yet internally, whispers grew louder. Was the golden boy losing his edge? Even then, his response was not reflection, but escalation. He doubled down on his swagger, appearing on news segments with fiery monologues. My opponents don't beat me, they get lucky, and luck runs out. He saw the upcoming hearing not as a challenge, but as a stage. Jasmine was just the newest foil for his practiced arrogance. In closed-door prep sessions, he bragged to staffers, "She won't last 10 minutes. I'll have her spinning in circles before she even realizes what hit her." Laughter filled the room. What he didn't realize was that this overconfidence had betrayed him before. Years earlier, he'd underestimated a civil rights attorney in a similar fashion. He interrupted, mocked, and grandstanded until she presented one piece of evidence that unraveled his entire argument. The clip of his stunned silence circulated quietly among legal circles for years, a cautionary tale he pretended didn't exist. Their pattern of underestimating opponents had consequences before, but this time it would cost him more than his reputation. Before the courtroom cameras, before the trending hashtags and the viral clips, there was a young woman walking the narrow, uneven streets of her neighborhood in South Dallas, clipboard in hand, sun beating down, determination in her eyes. Jasmine Crockett's journey didn't begin in power, it began in persistence. Raised in a working-class family that valued grit over glamour, she learned early that if something wasn't fair, you didn't wait for someone else to fix it. You stood up and pushed back. Neighbors still talk about the teenage Jasmine who organized a petition when a local park's funding was quietly cut. She went door to door, explaining policy with the clarity of someone far beyond her years. She didn't raise her voice, she raised awareness. Weeks later, the city council restored the funds. It wasn't a headline, it wasn't glamorous, but it was a victory born from quiet resolve. Her path to the law wasn't preordained by privilege. While others built networks through elite schools and inherited connections, Jasmine juggled multiple jobs to pay her way through university. Nights in the library bled into mornings in classrooms. On weekends, she volunteered at legal aid clinics, watching families navigate a system that seemed designed to wear them down. She didn't just study case law, she studied people, their anxieties, their resilience, their fight. In law school, she earned a reputation not for theatrics, but for strategic brilliance. Professors would hand her complex hypotheticals meant to stump a room, only to watch her untangle them with surgical precision. She listens first, one mentor recalled, then she strikes where it matters. Her early courtroom years were anything but easy. She wasn't handed marquee cases. She took the ones no one else wanted. Tenants facing eviction, immigrants targeted by obscure regulations, workers wrongfully terminated without fanfare. She stood alone in cramped hearing rooms, often facing opponents with bigger teams, deeper pockets, and louder voices. But time and again, she emerged with hard-fought wins, not because she was the loudest, but because she was the most prepared. One of her early breakthroughs came during a pro bono immigration case. A family on the verge of deportation had exhausted every avenue. The father, a construction worker, had lost hope. In a tense hearing, the opposite counsel dismissed her argument as naive idealism. She stayed silent as he spoke, hands folded, eyes focused. Then, at just the right moment, she slid a single document across the table, one overlooked procedural error that dismantled their entire case. The judge's gavel struck in her client's favor. The family wept. Jasmine simply nodded, as if she had known all along. Her rise in public service followed a similar pattern, not with fireworks, but with unshakable presence. She ran for office in a district where political machines were deeply entrenched. Pundits dismissed her candidacy as symbolic. She knocked on every door anyway. When opponents smeared her, she didn't retaliate with cheap shots. She countered with policy, clarity, and community presence. In televised debates, while others sparred for sound bites, she anchored herself in facts. Viewers described her as the calm in the storm. The turning point came during a particularly heated campaign rally. A heckler shouted a slur from the crowd, trying to derail her speech. For a brief second, the air went still. Then Jasmine leaned forward, eyes locked on the man, and said evenly, "Your fear doesn't intimidate me. It reveals you." The crowd erupted, not just in support, but in recognition. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was voicing the quiet defiance so many carried inside. Her colleagues often underestimated her because she didn't seek the spotlight. She let her work speak. In committee hearings, she dissected proposed bills with the precision of a surgeon, exposing loopholes others missed. She became known for staying calm when others shouted, finding pressure points no one else saw. Opponents learned to fear that silence because it usually meant she had found something they hadn't. Despite her growing influence, she carried the weight of sacrifice. Long nights away from family, personal attacks in the media, whispers questioning her qualifications. Through it all, she stayed focused. "They can talk, I'll build," she once told a friend. That strategic mind, that steady hand, wasn't forged in privilege. It was shaped in resistance. She learned to navigate spaces not built for her, to anticipate dismissiveness, to weaponize preparation against arrogance. And now, standing in a federal courtroom, facing one of the most boastful opponents of her career, those years of resilience weren't just memories. They were armor. She didn't need theatrics. She had receipts. She had strategy. She had presence. Every challenge she had faced had prepared her for this exact moment. The courtroom had settled into a taut, expectant silence. Every pair of eyes seemed to vibrate with anticipation, every whisper in the gallery carrying weight. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Who would falter first? Who would command the room? Who would control the narrative? The antagonist rose, posture rigid, voice sharpened with intention. His opening salvo was more than argument. It was performance. Words dripped with derision, each sentence punctuated by a sly smirk or a pointed glance at Jasmine. "Counsel," he began, deliberately slow, "while your enthusiasm is admirable, it cannot substitute for experience. Let us not confuse passion with precision." Gasps and murmurs fluttered through the gallery. Reporters scribbled feverishly. Cameras zoomed, capturing the subtle tightening of Jasmine's jaw, the faint but unwavering set of her shoulders. She did not reply immediately. She did not flinch. She simply listened, absorbing every inflection, every carefully crafted barb, every calculated attempt to unnerve her. He leaned into the theatrics, pacing like a predator across the courtroom floor. Each step echoed against the polished wooden panels, a metronome of intimidation. "And consider," he continued, voice rising, "the implications if we allow such oversight to dictate the rule of law. Are we to abandon decades of precedent because of a single, untested claim?" His words were meant to provoke. The gallery shivered, some with approval, others with disbelief. Aides whispered under their breaths, shifting papers, nodding at each other. A tension crackled between them and the podium, a storm contained in measured decorum. Judge Beryl leaned forward slightly, her fingers interlaced, eyes narrowing with curiosity. There was a flicker of amusement, a trace of disbelief, as if she were trying to reconcile the antagonist's confidence with the evidence she knew existed on the other side of the bench. Jasmine moved. She did not rise immediately, allowing the words to settle. Her gaze swept the room once, slow and deliberate, marking reactions, noting the shifting expressions, the subtle signs of overconfidence in her opponent. Her silence was a weapon, her calm, a signal that she was entirely unshaken by the theatrics around her. The antagonist escalated further, voice now dripping with mockery. "I would suggest, counsel, that you revisit your claims before attempting to lecture the court on matters you clearly have not mastered." Each phrase was punctuated with a look at Jasmine, as if daring her to break. But the gallery had begun to notice a pattern. His bravado, rehearsed and relentless, seemed less commanding and more performative with each passing minute. Even as he spoke, a few reporters exchanged subtle glances, questioning whether the spectacle was masking substance. The tension shifted imperceptibly, a tide turning beneath the surface of public scrutiny. Footsteps echoed again as he circled the room, each step a metronome of menace, and whispers swelled almost in unison. Is she going to respond? Can she match him? The room leaned in collectively, holding its breath. Jasmine's hand rested lightly on her notes, fingers tracing lines she had memorized and cross-checked 100 times. Her expression remained composed, her mind working through each counterpoint, anticipating the next move, calculating the perfect moment to strike. And then came the laugh, heard across America. The courtroom seemed to inhale as Jasmine Crockett finally rose. There was no sudden motion, no dramatic gesture, just a quiet authority, the kind that bends attention without demanding it. Every eye in the room followed her as she stepped forward, papers in hand, a calmness that contrasted sharply with the antagonist's lingering arrogance. She began softly, almost conversationally. "Your Honor, members of the court," she said, her voice even, steady, drawing the room into a rhythm of attentiveness. "Let us examine the facts without embellishment or exaggeration." The antagonist leaned back, a smirk playing across his lips. He expected hesitation, for her to stumble under his earlier onslaught. But Jasmine didn't stumble. She didn't rush. She let the silence stretch just long enough for the anticipation to build, for the gallery to settle in, collectively leaning forward as though drawn by gravity itself. Then, layer by layer, she dismantled his arguments. Each point he had made was met not with defensive counterpoints, but with calm, surgical precision. She highlighted inconsistencies, misquotations, procedural oversights. Every phrase was chosen to expose overconfidence while maintaining the poise that had become her signature. The first reveal was subtle, a small discrepancy in the evidence the antagonist had cited. Cameras caught the twitch of his eyebrow, the brief tightening of his jaw. Murmurs began in the gallery. Did she just... Wait, that's... Phones moved quietly, fingers flying, some recording, some tweeting, others silently Googling to verify what they were witnessing. Her next point cut deeper. She referenced a document that had been overlooked, buried in the procedural record, but pivotal to the case. The antagonist's smirk faltered. He shifted in his seat, eyes narrowing, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. The tension in the room thickened. Reporters scribbled furiously. A collective hush fell over the audience, punctuated by a few gasps and whispered, "Oh my gods." She paused intentionally, allowing the weight of the evidence to settle. Every heartbeat seemed amplified. Then she delivered the second layer of her argument, a precedent carefully chosen to frame the antagonist's claims as not only legally flawed, but fundamentally inconsistent with prior rulings. The subtle shift in tone was barely noticeable, yet the effect was undeniable. His posture, once confident, began to crumble imperceptibly. His eyes darted to papers, to notes, to nothing at all. Jasmine's voice never wavered. She paced slowly, deliberately, letting her presence fill the room. And if we consider the intent behind these statutes, it becomes clear that the claims presented here today do not align with either the law or the principles it is meant to uphold. Each word landed like a measured strike, dismantling argument after argument, leaving nothing but the raw weight of truth. Judge Beryl, who had leaned forward earlier with a flicker of amusement, now appeared almost suspended in thought. The laughter that had erupted minutes before had faded into stunned silence. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, tracked every movement, every phrase. Jasmine's calm had transformed the room's energy from anticipation to awe. The antagonist tried to regain control. He interjected, voice slightly sharper, trying to assert authority. Counsel, that interpretation. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She allowed the interruption, a brief pause, then continued, layering her rebuttal with evidence that left no room for evasion. With respect, your claims overlook a critical piece of documentation. She slid a single sheet across the table. Cameras zoomed in on the paper, capturing the bold lettering that contradicted his narrative entirely. The courtroom collectively leaned in. Gasps echoed. Phones typed furiously. Analysts, commentators, and observers would replay this moment countless times, dissecting her precision, her timing, her command of facts. The antagonist's voice faltered. He glanced toward Judge Beryl, whose gaze was unwavering. The earlier amusement was gone, replaced with that rare judicial intensity, a measure of appraisal that stripped away pretense. He swallowed, his confidence visibly cracking, his carefully constructed performance unraveling in real time. Jasmine pressed on, each revelation cascading into the next. She connected threads he hadn't anticipated, demonstrating a depth of preparation that bordered on theatrical genius. Each layer of her argument was deliberate, choreographed in a way that drew attention not to herself, but to the undeniable logic she wielded. The gallery responded with murmurs of approval, some rising to whispered cheers, others holding their breath in suspended disbelief. She paused again, letting the courtroom absorb the impact. One document, one line, one perfectly timed argument that turned the tide. The antagonist's smirk was gone. He pressed his lips together, eyes flicking between the paper and the judge, searching for some loophole, some escape. There was none. Every counter, every possible objection had been anticipated and neutralized with elegant precision. Jasmine's calm, unshakable demeanor contrasted sharply with his visible agitation. The tension was electric. The room seemed to lean in collectively, holding its breath as if the world had compressed into the span of a heartbeat. Her voice, soft yet commanding, concluded the sequence. The evidence speaks for itself, and in the face of these facts, there can be no alternative conclusion. A silence followed that seemed to stretch for eternity. The court, the gallery, the cameras, all suspended in a moment of awe. The antagonist slumped slightly in his chair, defeated not by rage, not by theatrics, but by the relentless clarity of his argument. Every attempt to recover faltered, each gesture of dominance rendered meaningless against the meticulous architecture of his argument. Judge Beryl exhaled softly, the tension in her shoulders finally releasing. The previous laughter, the fleeting amusement at the spectacle, now gave way to respect. Even she had been caught in the quiet brilliance of Jasmine's strategy. Observers would later describe the courtroom as frozen in time, each person acutely aware that they had witnessed something rare, a performance of intellect, poise, and unassailable preparation. Phones continued to record, hands hovered over keyboards, social media feeds lit up as hashtags began trending in real time. Witnesses whispered to each other, "Did you see that? She dismantled him. That was perfect." And in that perfect orchestration of facts, timing, and calm authority, one truth became undeniable. One document, one line, one perfectly timed argument, and the courtroom was hers. The courtroom's doors swung open, and the echoes of Jasmine Crockett's triumph spilled into the streets. Reporters jostled for position, cameras still rolling, capturing every measured step she took. Phones in the crowd clicked, recorded, and uploaded. Within minutes, the digital world had erupted. Hashtags surged across every platform. Jasmine strike, Beryl laugh, truth wins. Each one carried with it millions of impressions, retweets, shares, and comments. Memes began to flood feeds, side-by-side images of the antagonist's faltering smirk and Jasmine's composed gaze. Captions like, "Calm wins over chaos," and "One document, one victory." TikTok creators recreated the moment, layering dramatic music over clips of courtroom reactions, the gavel hitting, the subtle shifts in posture that told the story of her quiet dominance. Journalists scrambled to frame the narrative. Headlines appeared at lightning speed. Crockett turns the tables, a courtroom mic drop for the ages. Judge Beryl's laughter didn't see this coming. Arrogance meets precision, the case that broke the internet. Editorials praised her strategic brilliance, her calm under fire, the unshakable composure that had turned what many expected to be a routine hearing into a moment of national attention. Politicians weighed in, each comment layered with careful consideration. Some expressed admiration for her poise. Others acknowledged the broader implications for justice and civic integrity. Progressive leaders celebrated her as a symbol of resilience and competence, while commentators on the other side of the aisle were forced to confront the undeniable clarity of her argument. Clips of pundits dissecting the sequence appeared in news segments, repeating her methodical dismantling of the antagonist point by point. In the streets outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. Supporters had gathered, some holding signs emblazoned with phrases like "dignity over arrogance" and "facts matter." Conversations hummed with awe and excitement, the collective energy palpable. People replayed videos on their phones, pointing out the exact moment the antagonist faltered, the subtle shift in tone, the precision of her evidence presentation. Each replay added a layer to the legend that was rapidly forming. Memes and reaction videos multiplied exponentially. Late-night hosts referenced the courtroom saga, turning snippets into segments of cultural commentary. Influencers and commentators uploaded their own breakdowns, tagging friends and followers to witness the sequence of events. The narrative took on a life of its own, spreading far beyond legal circles into the broader cultural consciousness. Jasmine walked slowly, deliberately down the courthouse steps. Her expression remained calm, almost serene. She did not raise her hand in triumph. She did not pose for the cameras. Instead, her eyes swept the crowd, acknowledging the ripple she had set in motion without needing to claim it. People whispered her name. Phones held aloft, capturing every moment. Her quiet dignity contrasted with the chaos surrounding her, cementing the image of a hero who commanded respect through composure rather than theatrics. The antagonist's aides lingered behind, whispering among themselves, visibly shaken. Her earlier confidence had dissipated into a fog of disbelief. Analysts dissected every misstep, replaying moments where she underestimated her. Her social media mentions surged, but now in a wave of astonishment and critique rather than admiration. By evening, the digital landscape was saturated with the event. Clips circulated internationally. Commentators in distant countries marveled at the courtroom precision, the strategic brilliance, the unexpected viral phenomenon. The story of one laugh that had seemed trivial transformed into a narrative about resilience, strategy, and the power of preparation. Newsrooms compiled highlight reels. Podcasts dissected her every move, celebrating the combination of patience, intellect, and calmness that had toppled arrogance. Every replay, every reaction, every analysis reinforced the same conclusion that a singular moment in a courtroom had captured the imagination of millions, becoming a cultural touchstone. And through it all, Jasmine walked onward, step steady, gaze focused. She did not gloat, she did not retreat. She simply moved forward, carrying with her the weight of a victory that extended far beyond the walls of the courthouse. What started as a laugh became a national conversation. In the quiet aftermath, as cameras began to fade and reporters packed up their equipment, Jasmine Crockett stood not as a victor in a moment of spectacle, but as a messenger of enduring truth. The laughter that had once cut through the courtroom now felt distant, a fleeting echo compared to the resonance of evidence, diligence, and unwavering integrity. She reframed the story not as a personal triumph, but as a testament to principles far larger than herself. In times of chaos, calm evidence still wins, the narration might say, capturing the essence of what had just unfolded. Jasmine had demonstrated that arrogance, no matter how loud or well-practiced, could never overpower methodical preparation, empathy, and a commitment to justice. Her victory was a reminder that substance will always outweigh performance. That dignity is a force stronger than mockery, and the truth cannot be silenced by bravado. The courtroom had been more than a stage for individual confrontation. It had become a microcosm of the broader struggle between accountability and pretense, between those who wield power carelessly and those who serve it with responsibility. Every observer, whether a casual viewer scrolling through social media or a seasoned analyst, could see the moral clearly. Expertise and calm resolve command respect, while arrogance collapses under scrutiny. Jasmine's actions tied directly back to the values she had long championed: service over self-interest, integrity over spectacle, and justice over manipulation. She had faced challenges before, moments when systems seemed stacked against her, when the odds favored those willing to intimidate, belittle, or distract, but she had always relied on preparation, knowledge, and unwavering composure. This moment, amplified by national attention, was no different. It was the culmination of years spent honing skills, understanding people, and believing that truth, when wielded wisely, has its own momentum. The ripple effect of her courtroom precision extended beyond the immediate legal victory. Citizens, activists, and young professionals watching from around the country felt a renewed sense of possibility. They witnessed the power of standing firm against arrogance, of responding to mockery with calm authority rather than retaliation. Her approach offered a blueprint. Preparation, clarity, and moral courage could turn even a fleeting moment of laughter into a lasting lesson for society. Public discourse shifted, if only briefly, from sensationalism to reflection. News analysts emphasized her strategic mastery. Educators highlighted her example in classrooms. Commentators across platforms examined how dignity and evidence-based reasoning could triumph in moments saturated with theatrics. Even those who had initially doubted her approach began to see the broader lesson embedded in her conduct, that leadership, whether in courtrooms or communities, is defined by consistency, not volume. The antagonist, diminished in confidence and public perception, became a cautionary figure, a reminder of what happens when arrogance replaces accountability. And yet the focus remained on Jasmine, not his missteps. She embodied the principle that victories are most meaningful when rooted in values rather than vanity, in substance rather than showmanship. As the nation digested the event, the moral crystallized. Truth is enduring, mockery fades, arrogance withers, but methodical preparation, ethical resolve, and courage in the face of intimidation leave an imprint far beyond any fleeting spectacle. The lesson echoed beyond the courtroom, a reminder to every observer that service, integrity, and diligence matter more than applause or viral moments. Jasmine's example reaffirmed the timeless truth that moments of crisis are best met with calm clarity and evidence, not bluster. And so, as the world reflected on the viral courtroom saga, one truth stood clear. Laughter may echo in the moment, but truth echoes through history. And so, the moment that began with a single, unexpected laugh ended with a nation watching, captivated, inspired, and questioning what true power looks like. Judge Beryl's chuckle, once a spark of disbelief, had ignited a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. Mockery had met composure, arrogance had met preparation, and in the middle of it all, Jasmine Crockett had turned the courtroom into a stage for truth. From the initial smirks to the climactic mic drop, the story unfolded with a rhythm that left viewers breathless. The antagonist's bravado collapsed piece by piece under the weight of meticulously presented evidence. Jasmine's calm, strategic brilliance did more than win a case. It reminded everyone that courage, preparation, and integrity can dismantle even the most confident opposition. From viral clips to trending hashtags, from memes to commentary, the courtroom showdown rippled far beyond the marble walls, touching lives and igniting conversations nationwide. And now, the story doesn't end in the courtroom. It lives in every conversation, every tweet, every retelling. It lives in the reminder that dignity, strategy, and resilience are powerful forces, forces that don't just command respect, but inspire action. If this moment gave you chills, hit subscribe, because this is where dignity meets drama every week. Here you'll witness not just the headlines, but the stories behind them, the heroes who rise, the challenges they face, and the truths that can't be silenced. Every week, a new story, a new battle, a new lesson in courage. Don't miss it.